7 rappers who got famous after prison. Hip-hop's relationship with crime is long-running and well-documented. From the out-and-out thugging of the early 2000s gangsta rap, to the more subtle manipulations of the San Francisco-based scam rappers, many hip-hop artists have made it clear that they're willing to go to almost any length to achieve success. But despite rap's love for beating the system, there's one thing no one wants to deal with: going to prison. Besides the obvious fact that being famous inside prison walls makes a dangerous experience even more treacherous, the years of silence that often come with being locked away can be a death sentence for a career. Even the most promising careers, like Kodak Black, Bobby Shmurda, or Tay-K, can stall if robbed of its momentum. But for some rappers, their time in prison actually wound up benefiting them. Whether it was the publicity of the event, an epiphany they had behind bars, or an additional layer of credibility for their persona, the artists on this list managed to make lemonade out of lemons. Before we get started with this video, make sure you like it and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, here's 7 rappers who got famous after prison. At number 7, we have Offset. Though it seems like Migos only entered the mainstream consciousness of rap over the last few years, they've actually been around since early 2012. Around 2013, the group began to gain traction, earning cosigns from features like Gucci Mane, and eventually securing a hit when Drake remixed their track Versace. Ironically, as the group began to rise to prominence, they were missing a member: Offset. Having been convicted of a felony years prior, Offset had violated his probation and been incarcerated in Georgia's DeKalb County Jail. At the same time, the group was releasing their mixtape YRN, which gained them some attention from national publications such as Spin and Rolling Stone magazine. Luckily for the group, Offset was released in early 2014, and the group released a series of mixtapes and albums that continued to build their momentum. Their big break came in 2016, shortly after they announced that they had left 300 Entertainment in favor of independent management. Their release of their 2016 album spawned the hit single Bad and Bougie, which launched the group into international fame. With many people's favorite member of the group being Offset, there's no telling what they'd be had he stayed in prison for a couple more years. Number 6, Tee Grizzley. Tee Grizzley's trajectory may have been very different if not for a failed robbery attempt in 2014. After being picked up for an attempt to rob a jewelry store in Lexington, Kentucky, Tee Grizzley was sentenced to 9 months for the crime. Ultimately, while in prison, Tee was also found guilty of another string of robberies that earned him an additional prison sentence, elevating his time in prison to anywhere from 18 months to 15 years. Luckily for the rapper, he only served about 15 months before being released in October of 2016. It was his time in prison that gave Tee Grizzley the motivation to spend more time improving his rapping, and he wrote his debut album while incarcerated. His first single from the album, First Day Out, quickly went viral, amassing more than 2 million views in just 3 weeks, with it now being the most viewed First Day Out by any rapper at 148 million views. He was quickly signed to 300 Entertainment and Atlantic Records, and capitalized off of his hype to release the mixtape My Moment. Though Grizzly isn't the household name that Migos or Offset is, each of his releases has performed slightly stronger on the charts, so it seems like he's here to stay. Number 5, Gucci Mane. Gucci Mane is one of the more interesting entries on this list because he's one of the only few rappers who seems to have truly benefited from prison. Gucci was already famous before he was incarcerated for 2 years in 2014, having built an impressive reputation up throughout Atlanta, and having founded 1017 Brick Squad, the same label that would help launch the careers of Waka Flocka Flame, Migos, and even Young Thug. Gucci had spent most of his early life in and out of jail, and in trouble with the law, usually for drug charges, but also famously for a murder charge in 2005 that was later dropped in light of evidence that suggested the incident was self-defense. However, when he was incarcerated in 2014, Gucci had an epiphany. In his autobiography, he admitted being forced into a lengthy prison sentence allowed him to free himself from his codeine addiction, and ultimately realized that he needed to abandon his criminal tendencies and focus on his music. After being released from prison in 2016, Gucci found massive mainstream success. His 3 highest charting singles, Black Beatles, I Get the Bag, and Wake Up in the Sky, were all released after his sentence. Additionally, Gucci continued to build relationships with some of rap's biggest artists, such as Drake and Chance the Rapper, and you can tell that he's never been happier. I mean, the guy went through such a transformation during and after prison that people actually thought he was a clone. Number 4, XXXTentacion. XXXTentacion has become something of a modern legend due to his sudden rise to fame, his inability to escape controversy and legal trouble, and his sudden, tragically young death. A lot can be said about X, but if nothing else, he was honest. He proved time and time again that his edgy, troubled, violent persona was not just a gimmick, or if it was, he had been committed to it for the majority of his life. In fact, before X became a major staple of radio airwaves, he was at the forefront of the SoundCloud rap movement, with people like his longtime friend, Ski Mask the Slump God. Ironically, it was legal trouble that introduced the two. X met Ski while in a juvenile detention facility on a gun charge. The two began to record music after their release, and began to gain some momentum online. Just as X's career began to grow, he was arrested in July of 2016. He remained in prison for about 9 months. During his stint in prison, his song, Look at Me, began to gain major traction. X secured a manager while still incarcerated, and began to receive record label offers. He eventually signed to an Empire distribution deal. After his release from prison, X grew steadily in popularity, his career culminating the release of the record that spawned singles like Sad and broke him through to the mainstream. Today, he's still one of the most streamed musicians in the world and has an impressive discography. There's a reason people have called him this generation's Tupac. Number 3, King Von. When Chicago drill began its formation in the early 2010s, the genre quickly attracted attention because of its rawness and authenticity. Drill, a dark and gritty subgenre of hip-hop, took form in the south side of Chicago and attempted to document the grim nature of life in one of the United States' most dangerous areas. Unlike many mainstream gangster rappers of the decade prior, Drill's major players were criminals that had verifiable rap sheets to back up the authenticity of their raps. For many rap fans, this was a welcome to change from the homogenization of traditional gangster rap that had occurred over the course of the early 2000s. But while gangster rap was becoming mainstream and drill was still taking shape, King Von was sitting inside a prison cell. After getting arrested for murder in 2014, he spent the next 7 years in prison. Luckily enough, the witness in his case ended up not testifying, and Von was released from prison in December of 2017. The trial was a wake-up call for Von, who decided to start rapping in an attempt to carve a better path. Von had some help from drill heavyweights Chief Keef and Lil Durk. Having grown up in Chicago's notorious Parkway Gardens housing complex, better known as O-Block, Von was good friends with Keef and was mentioned in his music often. By the time he was released from prison, Von had already developed a reputation amongst the drill fanbase and was quickly signed with Lil Durk's label OTF. Within 6 months, Von had racked up an impressive fan base and an array of viral hits, including the tracks Problem and Crazy Story. Number 2, Lil Baby. Lil Baby first made a name for himself in the rap scene in early 2017 with a mixtape called Perfect Timing, following that up with Harder Than Hard, which featured his breakout single, My Dog. However, it wasn't until 2018 that the rapper truly blew up, with the release of his debut studio album, Harder Than Ever. The album spawned the single, Yes Indeed, which featured Drake and jump-started Baby's career. The album led to Baby becoming a hot commodity within the scene, and jumping on a number of high-profile songs as a guest feature, including the Highest in the Room remix and I Do It by Lil Wayne. Baby even revealed he was originally slated to be on Drake's mega hit Toosie Slide. But before Baby joined the ranks of the rap game, he found himself sitting inside a prison cell. Before 2016, Baby had never rapped at all. He was known around his neighborhood as a plug to a lot of bigger rappers and an avid dice player. He was arrested in 2012 on drug charges and managed to lower his charges to just 1 year in prison. However, in 2014, Baby was picked up for another drug charge. He was hit with intent to sell and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, released in the summer of 2016. After his release, Baby decided to give rapping a try in an effort to find an income stream that was safer than drug dealing. His first mixtape, Perfect Timing, found immediate traction, and the rest is history. Number 1, Tupac. Tupac Shakur's career has become the stuff of legends. His rise to fame was filled with decadence, feuds, and political activism, and culminated with his untimely death in 1996 at the hands of a still unknown assailant. Tupac's legacy is so large that it's easy to forget that the entirety of his career, from his debut to his death, just lasted over 5 years. By 1995, Tupac was already a star. He had released Me Against the World, which launched him into the spotlight, as its singles Dear Mama and So Many Tears gained widespread traction. However, Pac had been fighting sexual assault accusations since 1994. Despite his consistent denials of being involved, Pac was ultimately sentenced to 18 months in prison. He was released on bond after just under a year, after Suge Knight, who had newly signed Pac to Death Row Records, posted his bail. After emerging from prison, Pac's focus was renewed, and he released All Eyes on Me, his most commercially successful album, and a historic milestone in rap. It was the first double album in the history of rap, and was certified 5 times platinum only a few months after its release. It's also one of the few rap albums to ever reach a diamond certification, indicating more than 10 million copies sold. While Pac was already famous by the time he was imprisoned, it was the short amount of time after prison that helped him permanently cement his legacy as one of the most important artists in the art form. So did anybody on this list surprise you? Let me know in the comments section below, and before you leave, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to our channel.